My name is Gill Whitty, and I am the founder of Women in Tech Switzerland. Today we have two speakers at our contributor workshop. The first one is Barbara Fry from Rethink Diversity, and she's going to talk about gender bias and behavioral science. I'm super excited to hear more about. The second speaker will be the author of the book called Why Men Win at Work. And her name is Gill Whitty-Collins, and she will go on 6:15. But let's hear from Barbara Fry.
Thank you so much, Hugh, for this introduction and for organizing this day. I'm very happy to speak to you today about a topic I'm sure most of you know and have heard of, and that's called unconscious bias in hiring. And I think we have a little issue with the screen showing part of my presentation only, if you just bear with me for a second. No, that's just a little bit. Wonderful, thank you so much. So unconscious bias, for people who have been thinking about diversity and inclusion, I'm sure they also know the term unconscious bias. It has become quite a reference term in the sense that it's a reason why progress is very slow in making organizations more diverse and inclusive. So unconscious bias, we will talk about what it actually is and why it actually is making our decisions, how is it affecting our decisions, and why it's worthwhile thinking about how we can overcome bias and how we can design systems and processes that help people in organizations make decisions that are more objective and fairer. When you've heard unconscious bias, maybe also you already made a link in your mind with the term training. Unconscious bias training is something that's being done a lot. Awareness training, and a lot of organizations globally and also in Switzerland have started or have been doing this for a while, awareness training, so that people become aware of their biases and what does it mean in daily life in organizations. I'm the founder of Rethinking Diversity, and that's a boutique consulting company focusing on diversity and inclusion. Our approach is really translating findings from behavioral science into the diversity and inclusion space, because we believe, based on what we know today on the brain, awareness training is certainly an important step. Without awareness, you don't create any change. But there's so much in research that is known today that can be translated directly into the organizations that will help actually make progress faster, because unconscious bias can be tackled systematically. So let me just jump in a little bit of science and talking about how our brain works and how our brain is dependent on what we have experienced in the past, and also how we are taking decisions, what's the context, how the information is presented to us. So most of our actions and things we're going to do about in a day start with an intention. We plan on doing something, we have an intention of creating something, of contacting somebody, of becoming better at something. So intention, well, everything starts there. And then obviously we have to move to action, actually doing what we set ourselves to do. And we all know that oftentimes it's not so easy to get from intention to action. Why is that? Well, intention is actually often blocked by the way our brain functions, by the way we go about making plans, what comes in the way, by the way we make judgments. And there are two fundamental concepts in the way behavioral science thinks about decision making. There are two aspects that are important to understand. One is the wiring, and wiring can be translated things that you have experienced in the past, emotions that you have, role models that you have witnessed, things that make your brain the brain you have. And then the context. Why does it matter? Context means the way I'm presented information, the moment of the day I have to do the action, or who is sending me the information, where do I read about this topic, who is the sender. All these things matter a lot in this path from intention to action. And so, as I said earlier, experiences matter. So everything you've experienced as a child, like for instance, was my mother a professional, even a career woman? Was my image as a child of women and mothers are all career women, or did I have maybe a bit different role model in my mom? And I don't need to judge. I'm a mom myself. I have been working from home, even for a short time I was at home, and most of the time I've been working as a mother. So I know a bit the pros and cons and the stereotypes that goes with both choices that we make, basically. What also impacts our decisions are the emotions of the moment. Am I angry about something? Am I feeling happy? Am I being reminded by the situation I have to decide about a bad memory of the past? So the emotions obviously have an impact on how we actually go from intention to action. Context I mentioned is things like framing. Is the glass half full or glass half empty? The way I look at things, the way things are presented to me. It can also be things like, is it easy actually to do the action? Or is it really complicated and it takes a lot of energy for me to do that, what I set out to do? So if you take a simple example, a lot of people at the end of the year, New Year's Eve, they have the resolutions of a better lifestyle in the coming year. One famous resolution is, I'll go to the gym 3 times a week. So we all know that with best of intentions, oftentimes we cannot follow through. And we know that it would be good for us, we would benefit, our health would be better, we may be looking better, feeling better. So there are all these benefits out there in the future. But in the present moment, to decide to go to the gym, there are a lot of reasons why I don't go, right? We know that from experience. And as I mentioned in behavioral science, these things are understood as part of our wiring that makes it hard for us to follow through. Like, am I normally a procrastinator? Is that something that's actually part of my nature? I have actually a hard time following through on many things. Or is it just going to the gym that's hard for me? Or what actually are the emotional benefits of going to the gym for me, and what is the cost? And we know from behavioral science that most people have, or actually humanity has, a present bias. Present bias means things that happen now have much more weight than in the future. We discount the future very rapidly, and it's just an automatic, let's say, almost rule that our brain has. The present always overrules the future if we don't make an extra effort to actually give more weight to the future. Then another aspect in this example of going to the gym 3 times a week could be what could help actually if somebody sees me going, if maybe my partner observes that I'm not going 3 times a week, that might actually help to make me go, because he or she says, well, you're not going, you said you would, so that could help. Or also things like, oh, the gym is 10 kilometers away, I maybe should do something closer. So all these aspects go into this equation from action to intention in this very, very simple example. There is an understanding in behavioral science that is fundamental in everything that is actually being researched on and taught in university and in science generally, is the work that was done by Daniel Kahneman on the way our brain processes information and takes decisions. And he has coined this term of system 1 and system 2 thinking. And he published this famous book of his called Thinking Fast and Slow. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. It was published now in 2010 in English, 2011 in German, where he describes in a schematic way the way we go about taking decisions. So system 1 is the fast brain, the intuition. It's effortless. We do it all the time. It's things like 2 times 2. it takes no effort. And it's the brain that we use and the thinking that we use in the vast majority of decisions we take every day. We could not always do an Excel sheet on the fact, do I wear brown or black shoes this morning? These things happen fast. And also in everyday life, in business, in human interaction, we need this fast thinking. We could not obviously work with system 2. System 2, which is slow, deliberate, it takes effort, it's analytical, and it's conscious. We actually are aware, oh, I'm actually really thinking about this problem now. So it's things like 28 times 17. Most of us, at least I, could do that just effortless. So system 1 and system 2 are elementary in the behavioral science of how we take decisions. And this will actually maybe come back through this presentation more, and it's important to remember that as we are taking most decisions in system 1, this is maybe not the right system to take decisions that are really important to us, that really have consequences for myself or for the organization I'm working for or the team I'm responsible for. So if we want to make sure to take objective and also fair decisions, we might want to think about this system 1 and system 2 thinking. System 1, as mentioned, is very dependent and impacted by things like context. So what is the environment around us? How is the information presented to us? And I would like to show you an example of a study that was done in Israel roughly 10 years ago. And if you think of people who have to take objective, rational decisions, who have to really think slowly and be careful about the decisions, it's judges. Judges who take decisions about other people's lives. It's very important, and we really hope they are slow in their thinking and deliberate and careful. So there was a study done in Israel where they looked at judges and their decisions. Oh, I see my slides are stuck. Let me see if I can get that working again. Is that off? Yeah. So this study was done in Israel. We're looking at judges who had to decide on appeal of people who were accused of a crime. And it studied what is their judgment throughout the day. Is there a variation in the severity of their judgments? And it was found that actually over the day, it varied a lot. So it started out with quite lenient and well-meaning sentencing. And it went down throughout the morning. You know, every person who came in had a stricter conviction until the moment it was really, you were really in bad luck if you were in that position. Then they had a break and they had a snack. They went back into session, and the pattern repeated itself actually over time. So it's quite striking in two ways. I think it's when you see it with hindsight now that we know, snacks and a break, of course they help because you're more relaxed and you're more objective. You think it's obvious that it helps. But the thing is, nobody thought about this, right? Nobody went into testing these things and made this experiment and really said, let's see if it has an impact. And the fact that it has an impact was quite dramatic in the sense that the judges were surprised, right? They were not aware of that, the impact that snack and break could have. And also the beauty, and that's often the case in behavioral science, the intervention, the change, how to make this better was obviously easy, right? You have a snack, you have a break. It didn't cost anything. What it cost was time, taking the time to assess the pattern and see what are the solutions, what can we do about it. And that's fascinating, oftentimes with experiments that are done in behavioral science and solutions that are developed. Most of the time, they are not really linked to costs because you have to buy a new system or go out and buy new infrastructure. It's really about how you go about your decision making, and that's really in your brain. And you can change a lot of your context yourself. So, zooming in on the topic of diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion in organizations almost automatically links to the question assessments, hiring, promotions. There's a lot of unconscious bias happening in these decisions. And I would like to start with a little example again. to tell you what I mean. I will show an example that will illustrate not only the impact of stereotypes on our decisions and affinity bias. Affinity bias means we are more, we automatically like people more that are similar to us. That's affinity bias. That's a very human nature element, and it's not bad in itself. It's just questionable if in hiring decisions this should be have such a big weight. And how actually salient, how visible something is, can even reinforce a stereotype. And this is important to know also, that we have people in HR generally take 10 seconds before they decide if a CV goes on the left or the right pile. I mean, obviously, big corporations have automated these processes, and there's the question what is fed into the algorithm, right? But if people look at CVs, the decision is super fast. It's intuitive. And we know from before, system one thinking is extremely easily influenced by our previous experiences, by our biases. So this is a study from Germany done in the last, like 4 or 5 years ago. And actually it was an experiment where a CV was sent to corporations of exactly the same person. Like the CV was identical, it was just a different name. The first name is a German, very German sounding name, Sandra Bauer. She got a recall rate for interviews of roughly 20%. The second sample that was tested was the same CV again, but the name was changed to a Turkish sounding name, foreign name, Meryem Öztürk. Already we see a drop, 14%, like she has almost a quarter less chances, probability than Sandra to be called for an interview. But the drop is even more dramatic if the same person wears a headscarf. So clearly, salience, here's an example, the headscarf seems to bring about a lot of negative stereotypes about this person that have obviously nothing to do with the CV, with the qualifications, because it was identical. This example obviously also illustrates that actually when you send in CVs, or when you ask for CVs as an organization, you should really not ask for pictures, and you should really also try to hide the name of the person for the people who review the CVs. And there might be other information that's actually worthwhile taking out, because you don't want people to be influenced by these kind of information, demographics, which most of the time have absolutely no correlation with the question, is this person the right fit for this job? So we have seen with these examples that we cannot always trust our brain, because our brain actually is super efficient. It looks for patterns. In all the information that we are presented, we are super smart at finding patterns. But that also means we filter a lot of information out that doesn't fit this immediate intuitive assessment that we made. And also things that we learned in the past have a very strong weight here. And the rest of the information is not taken really into account. So that means we have incomplete information, to say the least. That means decision making is more prone to be, we're more likely to make mistakes. So we have this automated way of registering and processing information, which in many situations in life is super important and helpful. Again, it is prone to be influenced by bias, and in decision making that is supposed to be or should be objective and fair, we should be really careful about this and look at ways to design better systems. Because oftentimes, like in diversity and inclusion, a lot of organizations are really serious about having more diverse teams. And it is very hard as a hiring manager or even as an HR professional to always have your unconscious biases in check. And that's almost impossible because we are all stressed. We have a lot of things going on in life. We are a lot of different demands put on ourselves. And then to have somebody basically sitting on your shoulder, always looking, attention, bias, don't be biased, it's not going to happen. It's way too demanding. Because these unconscious biases are deeply anchored in our brain. you could always almost go so far as to say, if you have a brain, you're biased. And I think once we acknowledge this fact, I find it also makes the discussion about diversity inclusion more scientific in the sense that we are not here to blame anybody. We are not here to blame men of being against women. Bias is something that affects everybody. It affects women equally as men, and there are also many women who have biases against other women. So it is really something that helps, I find, put this discussion on a more neutral and also scientific level. So how can this be translated into practice, into the way people are assessed in hiring situations or promotion or evaluations? I'll see my slides are a little bit stuck again, see if I can move it. Here we go. So I mentioned earlier at the beginning of my talk the training of unconscious bias so that people are more aware. And I said we need more than training. We have actually better tools now with the insights from behavioral science that help us to look at the processes currently used in hiring, in evaluation, in promotion decisions, and look at these processes, have an assessment done and say, okay, where in this process is it most likely that bias comes in and what kind of bias? There's a lot of research out there, and we have condensed all these research and literature into tools and analysis that we can apply to all these processes that help organizations evaluate the current process, see where there are areas for improvement, decide which ones they start first, and see how it goes, and measure what is being done. That's obviously important. We want to have an idea of if it's actually making an impact, so data is important in trying to apply behavioral science insights to your processes. Measure what you have at the beginning and see how it's going. So typical biases in gender discussions, like maternal bias, that's a bias that affects women. The moment they're pregnant and have children, a lot of people think about them as being less motivated, less engaged, sometimes even less competent. Performance bias is a bias that happens a lot in evaluations like performance reviews, because a good performance is not the same for men and women. Women tend to have a better performance and have a better results than men to be assessed properly. Likability bias is a very strong bias that is difficult for women to work around, because women are expected to be likable, to be nice, to be smiling, and if they are not, they come across as being abrasive, as being too direct. So it's a very difficult field for women to juggle. Okay, how nice am I? How smiling, or how am I still taken seriously, or what's my personal style in the end? So a lot of women are also insecure about this. Clearly, it is a bias that works in many ways. And again, not just in men with respect to women. Women have the same bias towards other women. But it's important to be aware of it and see how we can actually design systems and processes that help us make this impact smaller. I mentioned already the affinity bias. That is clearly something that is happening in so many ways. Think of an interview situation and the person walks in and you have an immediate connection with this person. You feel, oh, he's charming, she's nice, or I like her scarf, we have the same taste. So there's something we feel, we establish a connection, and I think that's fantastic when you make friends, right? That's the way we connect with human beings. That's us. But if you take decisions in hiring, you have to think about how much weight do I want to give to this, right? And I'm not saying that this should be completely set aside, but I think as a team, as a hiring team, you have to decide, okay, what do we do with this affinity bias? Because it's there, right? So how much weight do we give to the I like factor. And I think a lot of things are important actually also to be discussed in hiring teams. When there is more awareness about biases, then people can also say, yeah, I'm aware of it, I like him more than her, or the other way around. How important is it? Right? So going on and say, okay, what does it mean for talent management in general? It's actually worthwhile looking at the process in the whole talent management life cycle. And here I'm showing you the hiring, recruitment process very broadly chopped up in the phase where you attract talent, where you're trying to hire the best, when you're screening and inviting people for interviews, how you conduct the interviews. Promoting fair is another a very important topic. How are people promoted is actually a very tricky question. The hiring process in many organizations has been already improved to quite a substantial degree, but promotions, once people are in the organization, is a more packed field. And we know from research that women get less promoted even in the first round of promotion. And not because they ask for less promotion, it's just because they're judged differently. And these are really hard facts. So promotions are really still the big challenge to make organizations more diverse and inclusive. So process design, again, it might sound abstract, but actually it's really simply looking at how is something done and how could it be done better so that bias has less a chance of affecting the decision making. So with the example of interviews, I would like to give you just a very short list of things to look out for if you're doing interviews. First of all, never ever do unstructured interviews. So unstructured interviews are conversational meetings with a candidate. These are really you have such a big risk of having all kinds of biases entering in these discussions, and it's extremely hard to compare one candidate to the other and say which one is the best person for this role. So unstructured interviews are really something to let go of. So a structured interview gives you a much better chance to really have a basis for decision making which is more objective and fairer. So a part one of a structured interview is clearly define the questions before the interview, agree in the team, the hiring team with HR, what are the questions we want to ask and why do we ask them? How are they linked to the skills that we need? And so you will only ask questions that are relevant and really are testing for the skills that you are looking for. And also make sure you all agree on a scoring matrix. What is actually a good answer? What does good look like? And I'm saying ahead of time is crucial here, because throughout the process, it's very often the case that we start liking somebody more than another candidate, and then we dismiss these skills and criteria that in the beginning we thought were important, but actually, he's just better. But it's actually not. Maybe this person has 3 out of the 5 criteria, and the best would have 5 out of 5. So it's important to always remind you, what have we agreed as a team? What the skills are we need. Very important to ask all the candidates the same question. It seems like a no-brainer in a way, right? That you would do that. But if you don't have a structured interview, you will probably not do it. You will ask a couple of questions there, another couple there. So always the same questions in the same order. And then important to score immediately the answers. Immediately. Why? Because there are a lot of biases coming in, like the halo effect. Halo effect is, you've probably heard, like we have a very favorable impression because somebody answered the first question brilliantly. And we think, oh my God, she's fantastic, or he's going to be the person. So we look on the answers to questions number 2, 3, and 4 much more favorably. So we have a bias. Our judgment is skewed. So that's why it's important to judge, to give a score immediately. And then when you compare in the end between the candidates, compare horizontally. Compare question 1, how was it answered? Question 2, how was it answered? And not horizontally, because then the halo effect plays in quite strongly. And there's the opposite effect, obviously, the horn effect. If somebody starts out badly and kind of messes up the first question, we are cringing internally saying, oh my God, this is going to be tough, this interview. We all have these reactions, right? But having a structured interview helps you to stay on track and be fair to everybody. And you have actually also not potentially missed out on a great candidate who was just super nervous at the beginning. Don't discuss your scores with your colleagues. If you have a panel who assesses the candidate, don't discuss their scores. Why not? Because you influence each other very easily. It's important to write down your score individually and not discuss them. And then a small thing, but also big effect, try not to read the CV before the interview. And often, you might have a panel assessing a candidate, let's say 3 people, and not everybody has actually already seen the CV. And I think actually that's a good thing. With CVs, as surprising as it might sound, can be very misleading, because in CVs you pick up things like the university the person has gone to, sometimes there are even hobbies in there, or where the person has gone to school. And so these things influence me in many ways, like university is an example. In Switzerland, HSG has a big rating, maybe higher than, I don't know, Uni Fribourg for economics. I'd already beg for forgiveness. Uni Fribourg is great in economics, I actually don't know that. But let's say we have associations with this university. Ah, good one, bad one. Or I went to the same, or we had the same professor. So already I have an affinity bias that is maybe weighting too much in my judgment. Or if I have a seated person has grown up in Croatia, it might give me a bad impression because I have a bias and a stereotype of people from Croatia. So all this information, there's a lot of information in CV actually that don't lead to objective decisions. And I know this is going to be probably a challenge to a lot of people, that CV should not be it's a good tool for recruitment. Of course, you still need CVs, but I think you have to be really careful what the information you actually take out of CVs and how to treat information, all the demographics, and make sure they don't have an influence they shouldn't have. So I hope with this that I have given you an interview, an overview of things that can happen in the hiring process if you're not careful about unconscious bias. Again, I think it's important to, first of all, be aware of unconscious bias, learn about it, but I think the fantastic toolbox of research that's out there on how design better process design and better management practices that are de-biased can help actually an organization move quicker for more diverse and inclusive organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you. I have some questions, so I cannot leave yet. But we should start with some questions from the online participants, if there are any. No. So I will start. When you talk about gender bias, there is a lot about, you have to involve management in order to get the diversity when you hire, and you need to be also on top level aware of this. But I heard you mention a lot, the HR department. Mm-hmm. So in relation to behavioral science, is it also important to include management?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a great question. I think it's absolutely critical to involve, obviously, the leadership team, because they, in their case, it definitely needs to go also beyond awareness, right? Because I think ultimately diversity and inclusion needs to be a business priority, because there's so much evidence now that talks about why diverse and inclusive organizations are more successful. And I think for a leadership team, I think it will be important, first of all, that they actually meet this, right? That they set goals and that they hold their organization accountable for these goals. And I think secondly, if you say behavioral science and the leadership team, there's a lot of unconscious bias in management practices. So management practices is things like how are people assigned to a really cool project, right? That gives you a lot of visibility, that makes you likely to be promoted. So how are these decisions taken, right? Because there's a lot of bias in there as well. So if management and leadership is aware of things, can also has I think a very important impact in making the organization more inclusive.
Okay. And do you have any questions? Because then I have another one. You also mentioned that you get affected by looking at the CVs. And it's super normal when you hire people to look at the CVs. So what kind of selection process do you then suggest if it's not a good way to select the best candidate in relation to looking at the CV?
Well, I think the CVs are still obviously the standard tool. And I think I'm not saying to get the CV, right?
Okay.
What I'm saying is the CV, when you ask people to send in a CV, don't ask them for photographs, don't ask them for date of birth, maybe even don't ask, just make sure you have not all this demographic information that you probably don't need. But even if you have that, somewhere somebody receives the CV, right? So you have to see that the person who does the first screening, that you have removed the demographic information. If you already have it, make sure you store it somewhere, right? That you can still obviously say A is A and B is B. But to the people who assess these people, take this information out. I think that's the job of HR or in a smaller organization. Look at blinding these things, right? You can even just make a photocopy and just cancel it out. I think you have to be creative in a way and say, okay, we want to be more objective. What can we do? Very simple things. Okay, let's just take this information out. And you can also actually test these things, right? Even as a small organization, let's see how did it go? Are we very happy? How did it affect our decisions?
Yeah, true. So CVs are not out yet.
They're not out yet, but I know there are companies actually in the UK who are working on a really cool tool that allows them to, their selling pitch to companies is actually forget CV, we have a better assessment tool for you. So there are people working actually, because it is digital based, right? They are also already being programs and algorithms being developed for actual organizations. In their hiring process, they get rid of the CV. So it's a leap of faith for a lot of organizations. Yeah. Because the whole tool is based on behavioral science. So there's all the research baked into the program, in the algorithm that gives the companies the safety, the security that it is a really good assessment tool. Yeah. But I think for a large majority of companies, that's really out there. But there are a lot of low-hanging fruits in diversity and inclusion and in the whole talent bench arena that already can make a big impact. And you don't need to buy a new program to start doing that and start applying behavioral science.
But that's actually my next question, because let's say I'm an employee in a middle-sized company and I have heard about behavioral science and I wanted to tell the HR department about it and management and involve sort of, how can I as an employee affect the organization in relation to behavioral science?
I think the most important part is probably to, first of all, see what you find online. There's a lot online on actual tools in behavioral science and research. There's a fantastic book that I think many of you might have heard of by Iris Bonnet. She's a Harvard professor. She's actually originally Swiss. She wrote the book What Works. Also a really good engineer. It's not only about hiring, it's much larger. But in there are also great tools and already practice examples. And I think
as an employee talking to HR, I think probably a good question to ask is, what are we doing beyond the training? Because training is just, you know, you go in there for 4 hours, you leave, you've heard a lot of things that again, it's super hard to put that into practice. As an organization, what can we do to actually move faster to change? And I think a lot of HR people, HR people are aware of the challenges, but I think maybe they don't know much about the science and doing the design. And they could call me also to find out how it needs to be done, and I think in a more small way, right? We don't need to change it at once. Step by step.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was really, really interesting. And if you have any questions, you can just reach out to us. We will make sure that you elaborate. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is the #1 bestseller in France at Amazon. She wrote a book about why men win at work still. And actually, the purpose of Women in Tech Switzerland is to create awareness about gender equality. And we don't believe that it will still take more 100 and 200 years to actually close the gender gap at the current pace. So we want to create this awareness about all this amazing documentation which is out there, but we also want to take some action. And one of the actions we are taking is bringing people together who can add value to the whole gender equality discussion and really do something about it. Tomorrow, for instance, we have another event where we will live have a job interview where I will interview Josephine, and we will ask all the gender bias questions we can find. And you will really be surprised about how many of the questions you have been asked when you have been at a job interview. And after the job interview, we will have a quiz to test your knowledge about gender bias questions and gender bias in general. And then we will have Barbara really criticize the whole interview so we can learn from mistakes made. And that's tomorrow from 1 to 2:30 here at TrustGraph. And what we also were going to discuss today is that all this documentation is out there, and a lot of initiatives. We have the EDGE certification in relation to gender equality. We have the advanced commitment from a lot of the companies here in Switzerland. And we want to make sure that we cooperate with all these organizations and initiatives already out here. So if you're aware of, an organization that do a really great work, we would love to hear about it because we don't want to do double work. We want to create value in addition to the existing initiatives which are out there. So instead of work alongside each other, we want to sort of work together. And that's a big task, but we're getting there. But it's a long way, and we really need the support of all of you guys to support gender equality, because we know from documentation, experience, and interviewing people from corporates that it actually creates a lot of value when you have a diverse team. But let's take a break of 5 minutes, and then we will get back.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being so patient. Our next speaker, Gill Whitty-Collins, is online and ready to talk about her book, Why Women Went at Work. Hi.
Hello there. Hello everybody. So I am Gill Whitty-Collins. I am the author of Why Men Win at Work, and obviously a speaker and consultant, coach, board member on a mission to end gender inequality. A few words about myself first before I talk about the book. For many years, my previous life, I was 26 years at Procter & Gamble. So I was working on the businesses and brands there. I worked on global brands like Olay, Always, Pantene, and many other amazing brands. And in my last few years there, I promised myself that I was going to write a book about gender equality and diversity and what we need to do about it, based on some of my experiences, but also reading about, researching, understanding the experiences that women are having everywhere. Why did I need to write the book? You know, as I researched, I just learned the huge extent of the issue, that this was absolutely not something that was me or the people around me or the company I was in. This was something that was happening to women everywhere, every organization, every country, every society. And I know that it's even more of an issue in the tech world than it is in the world in general. But even generally, you look, I mean, wherever you look, if you look at the leadership positions, you'll see 90% plus men. Where did all those talented women go, you ask yourself? Where did all those incredibly intelligent women go? And, you know, we look in society, 3% of venture capital funding goes to women only. 25% maximum of what we see in media, in journalism, is women or is provided by women. So it is very much still a man's world. And I found it absolutely incredible, actually. I sort of stepped back and said, hey, it's incredible that we actually accept this. We actually just accept that this is the way that the world is. And it's unacceptable that this is the way the world is. Women are 50% of the population, of the intelligence, of the capability, of the competence. It's unacceptable that they're not 50% of the power and of the leadership and you know, of the people who are making decisions that affect all of us. And I just really felt and feel that it's time to stop being positive, patient and polite about this and accepting it, and time to get some action. So I kind of felt, you know, why did I write the book? I sort of had to, really. I felt I had to get some of this stuff out there. So I was just going to talk a little bit about what I talk about in the book. Obviously it's 200 pages, so I can't cover everything, but just to give you a little bit of a taste. The first thing I would say is I really believe that before we can fix things, we have to understand them. We have to truly understand why they happen, what really causes them. We have to go beneath the surface. So the book does really go very much beyond the facts. It's not just a statement of the reality of the issue of gender equality and the lack of diversity. It really goes beyond that and really gets into why does it happen, really, and really, you know, to quite a deep, often psychological level. of why. And, you know, starting very much with the point that, you know, I don't believe that one of the reasons why is generally that men are deliberately doing this to women. I do not believe that most men wake up in the morning and think, how can I build the patriarchy today? And how can I put as many barriers up in front of women as possible and hijack their careers? I think most men are good and decent and have very good intentions. They're not sexist, they're not misogynist, they're well intentioned, but nonetheless they still unintentionally do things that do create barriers. So the book talks about that and about those barriers and how they're created and why. It talks about the invisible power of culture and the important role that has to play, that when anybody is in a dominant culture, a culture that is dominated by one group of people, whether that's one race or men or whatever, it is actually impossible for a person to flourish and succeed and truly perform to their peak in that culture. And so it talks about the real importance of frankly not having a dominant culture, avoiding creating a dominant culture and avoiding being in a dominant culture, because it's just not a road to success. It also talks about unconscious bias. Obviously, I think we're all aware, I hope we're all aware that we all have unconscious bias. We are all biased towards things and against things. Even women, by the way, can be unconsciously biased against women based on all of the things, all the images and all of the stereotypes that have been fed to us since early childhood of what a woman is and can be and what a man is and can be. So it talks about the really important role that unconscious bias plays in how we perceive each other and how we perceive each other's performance. And linked to that, it talks about mini-me's and how there is, a propensity for people to reward, value, and promote people who they may not be realizing it, but they're basically mini-me's of themselves, and they recognize that person's amazing, and they don't realize it's because they're just like them, come from the same kind of background, talk the same way, think the same things. It's a very, very natural thing to do. It's very dangerous because it's the opposite of diversity. It absolutely strangles diversity in an organization if we keep recruiting, hiring, promoting the same people, non-diverse people. And also, importantly, obviously, if one particular type is dominating at the leadership levels and that type continues to reinforce mini-me's, then we're in a self-fulfilling prophecy that we can never get out of. The book talks about the competence versus confidence equation and why this happens. Such an important equation. It's very human. We all love confident people. We like confidence. We feel confident in confident people. It's extremely attractive, and it's something that we often choose in our leaders and in people that we trust to work with or do work for us. The problem with it, obviously, is that for many, many reasons that begin in childhood, men are generally, we have to generalize when we talk about this issue, generally more confident than women are. So when it comes to projecting confidence, perceiving confidence, this is somewhere that men often win out, and not necessarily because there is superior competence there. There can often be some extremely competent and knowledgeable and capable women who are not projecting the same confidence and are not seen or overlooked or not listened to. So we talk about this, then we talk about why why this happens and how important it is. Linked to this, the importance of what I call giving good meeting, how we are so often judged by how we perform and show up in meetings, and how generally men do this so much better, so much more confident to take the share of voice, to take the floor, to keep the floor, to seize the floor back from women, and women generally not so strong at this, and so many judgments made in the meeting about competence. The book also talks about what I call the cruel bit, which is that even when women understand the things that men do extremely well to win at work, even when they understand them and try to copy them, try to leverage them, try to use them themselves, this usually doesn't work, because sadly, things that we are absolutely okay with men doing, we're not so okay with men doing. It's proven, for example, that when women do speak up as much as men in meetings, that's not perceived well. That's perceived as a strength in men. It's perceived too often as irritating and overly aggressive in women. When women ask for, we all know about the equal pay gap or lack of it. We all know about the pay gap and the lack of equal pay between men and women for equal work. And yet it's shown that when a woman asks for a pay rise, that is badly perceived, versus when a man asks for it being perceived as completely normal. So some cruelties in, when women try to go after equality, that doesn't necessarily work for them either. And then obviously not forgetting what I call in the chapter, sisters are not doing it for themselves, and the lack of sisterhood, where too many women who have actually been successful are not supporting other women, not holding the ladder down, or at least shaking the ladder quite violently so that other women can't get up. And we'll talk about the reasons why that happens, and why that's so important, and why it's so important that women don't do this actually when they do succeed themselves, because as we've heard, men are supporting their mini-me's. So if women are not supporting each other, that's a double whammy again. The book also talks importantly about the women who do win at work. I call them the super 7%, the women who do make it. It's not 0% of women who make it to CEO or to the leadership levels. Some women do make it, and they have exactly the same barriers to overcome as the rest of women. So the book talks about what is special about those women, what is different about them, what sets them apart. And there are some fascinating things in there that I think, well, I think these are amazing women. They're not just intelligent and very, very capable. They're also extremely self-aware and have learnt very, very early in their careers some super smart strategies. Very, very interesting. Some things that we can all learn from. And I think perhaps most importantly of all, the book ends with a big to-do list, an action plan. Sunday Times called it an almighty set of recommendations. It was extremely important to me that the book was it's not a moan, it's not a negative book. This is the book that explores this issue, explores why it happens, but then uses that why to give a list of recommendations of, okay, if that's why it's happening, these are the things that we all need to do in order to counter it and in order to make inequality history. So there's a to-do list in there for parents, for teachers, for media makers and providers, for managers, for businesses, for women, and really importantly for men, because as I think is self-evident, if men have more than 90% of the power, the leadership positions in society and in business, then we absolutely need men to be to embrace this issue, to understand this issue, and to be part of the solution. So very much a to-do list for men. And the good news is that a lot of people have read it. Obviously, we want more to read it, because the more people read it, the more difference we can make. But what's great is I've had a lot of people writing to me, you know, personally, via the site, via email, via LinkedIn, whatever, to tell me that it has helped them understand the gender equality issue in a way they never had before, and that for the first time they really understand what they need to do to change it. I have people sending me their post-its saying, this is my list of things I'm going to do differently. I have women writing to me saying, I have just posted this information about myself that I had never publicized before, because I was, you know, didn't really believe that self-marketing was so important. And importantly, I've had an enormous number of men who've written and said, thank you, I didn't get this before, I get it now, you've helped me understand, you've taught me, I don't feel lectured, I get it, and I know what I need to do, and I'm going to start doing it from today. So that, I think, is really, really important, because clearly we women need to stick together on this and support each other, but we absolutely need men on board as well. So that's just a little bit about the book. There are obviously lots and lots of stuff in it about why all this happens. One thing I've just realized I didn't mention is the massive one, which is what I call the umbrella theory, which is women's beliefs still in the myth of meritocracy, and that doing the job is enough, and that the rest will take care of itself, while men in general know that it's a myth, and know that driving their visibility, marketing themselves is extremely important, and you have to lift up the umbrella and show the people above you the work that you're doing, and make yourself visible, and build a human relationship with people, because that's how they make decisions in the end about jobs and promotions. And obviously that's ability to do that seriously impacted for women, not just by the fact that they generally don't like doing it, but also by the amount of unpaid work that they carry, usually in the home with the kids, whatever, that just doesn't leave enough time in the day to do all of that, and a brilliant job, and brilliant visibility and networking as well. So tons and tons of stuff in the book about why it happens and what we need to do about it. But if I can, I was going to just ask if there were any questions, anything anyone wanted to ask now or discuss now.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. You talk a lot about involving the men, and Women in Tech Switzerland also think it's super important to involve the men in this discussion in order to take action and drive change. So what is the best argument to use in order to sort of convince them to be involved in this cause?
I think many things to share with men. I think it is really a case of sitting down and having a coffee chat about this. But I think the biggest, most important first thing to get through is this isn't charity, it's business. The most important reason for men to be interested in this is that it does drive results. So if you are working in a business that does not have equality at the senior levels, that doesn't leverage diversity at the senior levels, your results, your performance is less strong than it would be if you did. And in the end, I don't want to be cynical, but in the end, we do things, and we do things sustainably because they're in our interests. And my big point to men is, ironic, the book is called Why Men Win at Work. I should have flashed it up. If anyone has seen it, my lovely suffragette violet cover. But it's called Why Men Win at Work. But clearly there's an edge to that, right? Because are men really winning? Of course they're not really winning. If you're winning in a world where women are not winning and women are not represented equally and fully, your business or your organization or whatever your line of work is not performing as well as it could, because it's just missing out on that talent, on that knowledge, on those insights, on that diversity. And so you're not really winning. You're winning in your little world, but you could be winning so much bigger if you were in an equal and diverse organization or business. So I think that's the first big argument, because I think when people truly internalize that and truly believe that, and it's not a difficult concept, right? If you have more diversity of thoughts and opinion and input and ideas and insights, you're going to come up with better solutions, better decisions, better innovation, all of those things. I think once people get that, once that penny drops, then the door is open to really start on, okay, how do I do it then? I'm in, I bought it, how do I get it?
But I think that's the part of, convincing them that it's actually good, it's not charity, it's good for the business. It's a difficult, it seems like the best argument, but somehow let's say, okay, documentation says that we will increase our innovation and all this, all this documentation, then we hire 2 women, but it still continues to be the same kind of group of males. So they don't really get it in a lot of cases. So how did we convince them just not to hire the women so they can fulfill that criteria, but also really include them and really create the benefits of being diverse?
And I mean, it isn't easy. That there's been a lot of data around for a very long time that equality and diversity drives results. The way to do this is, to accept that you're not overnight going to write a book and the next morning every man on the planet goes, right, I get it, and I'm gonna drive my business with equality and diversity. All it takes is one man at a senior enough level to make a difference in any organization to get it. Mm-hmm. and then to persuade, and then to show the way, and then to get people to make changes, and then importantly to start seeing the results, to start saying, okay, I can see that the changes we've made, I can see the difference it's making. And then the conversion, any conversion, a brand doesn't become huge overnight. One person needs to try it and use it and then tell another and tell another. So we don't need to persuade every man in every company. Even if we can just start with one in each, we can make massive progress. We just need one pioneer to start the dominoes tumbling. Okay,
good point. We just need to convince one man in each company.
At a senior level, at a senior enough level that he can. And in fairness to our male friends, there are many who get this. There are many who get this. I do get a lot of communication from men who I absolutely get this. I'm totally sold, and I want to be in a world where that is like this, because actually I think it's absolutely better for everyone, not just business, by the way. It's also better for the family life, everything. There are a lot of men who do get this. We just need to keep working it and enabling them to make that difference at that senior level with their lead teams. And I do think it's super important. This is why I'm so passionate about men being on board as well. It is definitely, I can say from personal experience, there is a huge difference, unfortunately, between a woman at a senior level saying, this is an issue, this would be a huge benefit to all of us if we addressed it, here's what we need to do, and a man doing it. When a woman does it, it sounds self-serving. When a man does it, it sounds like, Oh, that's interesting. So it's so that's why it's so important. Every time a man speaks up and supports this, it is incredibly powerful. And I think that's one thing we do need to keep sharing with men. It's not just here's the data that says it's better, but just keep reminding them how incredibly powerful it is when they support this cause. Sad as it is to say, it is more powerful. It is more powerful. It's like when in a smaller way, you know, when you're in a meeting and a woman is interrupted and she's very frustrated because she hasn't finished her points. There's a huge difference between the woman saying, I was interrupted, can I finish my points, which sounds all of the things it sounds, and one of her colleagues, a male colleague, saying, you were interrupted, I'd like to hear the rest of your point. That the power of men allying on this and supporting is it cannot be overcalled. It's huge.
Okay, that's super interesting. I have another question. Because there's also talk about that it's not we don't have to fix the women, we have to fix the system. Mm-hmm. But still, there is something. I feel that's something that we can do too, in order to create the awareness and talk with the men and also be good role models. But what is your advice on, you know, being a woman and handle this gender bias issue?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, because I am one of the things I'm very passionate about is there's been too much talk, I think, over the years about, you know, here are the things women need to do to succeed in this, and they need to change this, and they need to dress like this, and they need to not do that, and talk like this, and all those things. Yeah. And I'm really, really against that, because I think, to me, you know, really what needs to happen for us truly to live in an equal and diverse world is people need to be able to be themselves and to be valued and leveraged for that. And we need to lose this sense of, this is what successful looks and sounds like, this is what leadership looks and sounds like, and so let's all try to copy that. So having said all of that, and having said I'm not the person who's going to say, women, you need to fix yourselves, to your point, I do think that there are some things that women can do, and one of them is, we touched on it, one of them is the sisters are not doing it for themselves thing. I think this is absolutely on women. If a woman is fortunate enough to overcome, and I believe it's fortunate, she's just been more fortunate than other women enough to overcome the barriers and make it to a very, very senior level, I think she has a responsibility to really think about how she can support the women up and coming behind her, and certainly not squash them, which you know, we do see, unfortunately, too often, the queen bee syndrome. So I think this is something absolutely on women. I think especially because we need to support each other, because men support each other. So, you know, as I said, it's a double whammy. But also it's extremely embarrassing, because men see this, right? Men are very, very aware when senior women are being catty and unsupportive to each other, and I think that's it's just a bit embarrassing, and women need to sort themselves out. So that's one area I think that we need to fix. And I think the other big thing, I guess, apart from just being aware, just being very, very aware of the important role that confidence plays, and that competence is not enough. People do value confidence, so you do need to find your confidence and find your way to project it, because it is valued. But I think the other big thing I would say links to the umbrella theory, which is just having that awareness. Just, you know, let's not be naive. It isn't a meritocracy. We are not only judged by the quality of our work. Human relationships, relationship currency, we call it, not just performance currency, counts. Men understand generally better than women that their relationship the relationship with people. People choose who they work with and who they promote based on the human factors, not just the quality of the work. And in order to have that, you have to be investing time in the relationship, in the connections, in the network, in the visibility, not just in the actual work. So I think just having that awareness, facing that reality and allocating time in the agenda, not just to do the work, but also to do that stuff as well, is something that women can do that will help themselves.
Thank you for the great tips. We have a couple of questions from our online audience. So the first question is, do we necessarily need men on board if women learn better methods and tactics to show their talents?
I believe yes. I believe that obviously, as I've said, there are some things that I think women could be a bit more savvy on, just, facing the realities of the world, as I've just talked. But ultimately, there is a limit to it. Ultimately, we have to be ourselves. We have to be authentic. It doesn't, if we try to crack this by working out the style that works, copying it, trying to fit in, ultimately we won't be ourselves. We'll be copying rather than leveraging the strengths that we have, leveraging what we are. And ultimately, people value authenticity in a person and in a leader. You can smell it if somebody's being inauthentic, if they're faking, if they're performing. You'd have to be an Oscar-winning actress to pull that off. And even then, I'm not sure you can. If we're going to trust somebody as a leader, we need to feel that they're showing up as themselves, and then they're not performing and putting on an act. So I do believe that there's just a limit to how far that can get. I think it can get you so far, but I think ultimately people smell it and it doesn't work. I don't think you can truly make it to the top as an inauthentic person or leader. And therefore, as we've said, the men have all the leadership positions. They're making most of the decisions. They're making most of the choices about who gets the job. So ultimately, no matter what we do, if we're ultimately faking it, we're not going to persuade them to choose us over the guy who's, being himself, being authentic, looks like a mini me, sounds like a mini me. We have to have men on board understanding these dynamics, understanding this is happening, having the self-awareness to say, okay, I have a bias towards this, and this culture is working much, much better for this group of people. We need them to have that awareness. Otherwise, I promise we'll just keep bashing up against the invisible ceiling.
Thank you, Jill. If I can comment on that, here's Laura. I made the question. Is that a?
Hi, Laura.
So yeah, thanks a lot. I think it's really interesting discussion. I guess one reason why I made the question was that I think it's somehow more comforting to think that I would not have to, or we would not have to wait for other people to change, so we could make the change from our side. But of course, I also agree that there are you can do only so much for yourself. I read a little bit about assertiveness. So this is a personality trait that predicts success, and it's also what you said, that it's men have they are more assertive, and maybe we women could learn more this kind of assertiveness, not in a way that it's fake or it's not me, but really kind of develop our personality. So I'd be curious to hear if you have some more comments on this topic.
I just want to come back first to what you said about because I think it's a very fair point. It is a bit it's difficult to get your head around. You know, if I'm saying we can't do this without men, which I truly believe, I don't believe we will ultimately get there without men being on board. I think they're running the world, and we have to. The one thing I would add to that you know will hopefully give you more of a feeling of power is one of the things that I deeply believe is we shouldn't invest too much of ourselves in a culture that doesn't work. If we find ourselves in a culture that is dominated, is male dominant, where we're being ourselves, we're bringing our talents, we're bringing our strengths, and they're not being fully valued and they're not being leveraged, and the culture, we just see the culture working so well for men who we potentially, some of them don't think are as strong as us and not working for us. My big advice is don't invest too much of your time and energy in trying to change that culture. Extremely difficult, nay, impossible, perhaps, to change a culture when you are not part of the dominant culture. You can change a culture, but you have to be on the right side of it to change it. Very, very difficult for the minority in a culture to change it. So don't invest too much. You know what? If you really believe that, you know, you get yourself into a situation where you're not being valued and leveraged as you are, walk away. Take your talent and your brilliance somewhere else. Find another culture where you can be. That's something you can absolutely take into your control, and many, many women have done it. I think it's incredibly courageous and absolutely the thing to do, whether that's your own business or just another culture that gets it. Because you know what, over time, the cultures that women leave for these reasons, they'll start to realize that they're losing fabulous women because the culture wasn't making those women feel that they belonged and they could perform. So I think that, you know, just wanted to share that, because ultimately that's our power. You know, the power that we do have is we can walk away. We can take our brilliance elsewhere. And I know sometimes that's really scary, and I know sometimes people don't feel they have that financial option, but if you do, you can do that. And I think it's extremely useful to remember that it's like anything in life. If people think that we will stay no matter what we're being put through, they treat us very differently from if they know that we will walk away. So there is absolutely power in that. Your question on assertiveness, I think assertiveness is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think it's all about how you do it, really. I think you can either, sometimes when we think about being assertive, if we think about it in a certain way, you kind of go, you know, whether it's coming from a man or a woman, if it's done in a certain way, it's not very attractive, and it's not necessarily somebody we warm to or want to work with. I think basically when it starts to get into that aggressive end of assertiveness. But assertiveness really just means knowing what you want, knowing what you will accept, knowing what you won't accept, and just making sure that you operate within that. And there are many ways of delivering that. I think it's fair to say there's a lot of data that says that a man and a woman can say exactly the same thing in theory with exactly the same words, and a man it will just be seen as that, it almost will go unnoticed, and in a woman it can be seen as overly aggressive. So that's just about the norms we're not from birth used to women presenting in the same way. So I think over time we just need to get used to that. My big advice remains, I don't want to tell any woman to not be herself and to not do things in her natural way and to try to learn the man way of doing it. And by the way, even if she does, as I've said, the crawl, but it won't necessarily work. But what I would say is this, you know, not gender specific. At the end of the day, everything is a conversation, everything is a discussion. You know, in life, when we're trying to express something, we always need to try and express it in a way that we think the other person will listen and will respond positively. So we just have to think about the how. But ultimately, society's got to get used to women asserting as well as men.
Thanks a lot. It's
Great, thank you so much. And where is it possible to buy the book?
So the book, I think the easiest, quickest way to get it is actually on Amazon UK. It's also available Waterstones. It's a bit more expensive. So it's a little bit cheaper on Amazon UK. It's a good offer on there. I can, after this, I can send you the link, and if you want to share it with anyone who's interested, and you can just go straight to it and they will deliver here. It is also, thank you, Laura, it is also available in Kindle version for anyone who doesn't. I like the lovely cover, but if you do like a Kindle, you can get it on Kindle as well. That's cheaper too. And I am recording the audiobook as well for anyone who likes to listen to it that way.
But thank you so much. It was very interesting and insightful to hear about your experience with men and women. And please send the link and we will share it with you.
I will do that. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Have a lovely evening, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
That was it for tonight. Thank you everyone for joining here and also online. We hope to see you at some of our other events, especially tomorrow, where we have the job interview. And otherwise, have the best digital days and enjoy the evening. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
What did you